They've dedicated their time and efforts building long-standing infrastructures such as banks, parks, and hotels. And I'm just going to turn it over to you at that. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you, thank you. Most of you know that I can't stand at a podium, so I want to be all over the place. Sorry, Marty. I've got to thank the Military Museum for allowing me to come and give this history presentation. And I got to tell you, you guys have done a hell of a job here. It's outstanding. It really is. Paul and I have been doing this program now for about 20 years. Unfortunately, Paul died about a year and a half ago, so I still refuse to take his name off of it because in the beginning it was his. One of the things that Paul and I did a very, very, very poor job of is we get so excited about telling about ourselves in the history, we forgot to talk about the History Museum. And fortunately, I've got somebody that was able to cover my rear end tonight, and not only have I going to tell you a little bit about the museum, but I'm also going to pass out some cards. You can go on the website, and you need to go see the museum because a lot of the crap I'm going to feed you tonight is not necessarily truth. And I have a real problem. When I walked into this room and I saw some of the people standing here, I thought, oh, my speech has just gone out the window because they're going to catch me in the act. Just for the fun of it, would you please, if you got to Cape Coral pre-1965, I got here in 1960. If you got here pre-1965, stand up. You see where I'm getting in trouble? And DePaulo sitting in the back, technically, they were the second resident of Cape Coral because Butch moved in with Kenny Schwartz, which was the first resident of Cape Coral. So he predates me by about 122 years because he's a lot older than me. And so I can include past Mayor Mazurkowitz in this mess. Joe, anybody that's got here pre-70, the year that I was supposed to graduate and didn't, please stand up. There is already history in the room before I open my mouth. Don't forget, you need to, if you've not been to the museum, have you been to the museum? Okay. If you haven't been to the museum, you need to go up there and take a look at it. They have two exciting events coming up on March 12th. Lee County Electric, Karen Ryan, is going to come and talk about how we got electricity. Now, Joe knows that story, and I can talk about it, but we're not going to take Karen's talk. But she is with Lee County Electric, and she's going to come and tell you how Cape Coral originally got electricity. And that was a feat in itself. And then Jim Farrell on April 9th. You old-timers, how have hurricanes affected Cape Coral? How many have we had? We had 4. Do we have any of those 18-foot storm surges that our past mayor said that we're going to have? No, we didn't. But Jim Farrell, chief meteorologist with Wink, is going to be coming talking to you about that. So, and Jim, by the way, I'm going to tell a side story. If you happened to be watching Wink TV during Irma when she went through, Marnie was in Operations Center with the city. And she called the 2 newscasters at the desk with Wink, and she was saying, we just got a new update, and anybody south of Pine Island Road is going to have an 18-foot surge of water coming over Cape Coral. And of course they were eating it up, because that's brand new news they could talk about. Well, I noticed after a while, Jim Farrell came out of his little back room, and he's kind of standing on the side like this, and he's listening because they're talking to her on the telephone, and he finally says, Madam Mayor, where did you get your information that we're going to have 18 foot of water over Cape Coral? Oh, it's all over the place. But we're in the operations center. We know that. He says, Madam Mayor, I got news for you. You got a better chance of an asteroid hitting Cape Coral than 18 feet of water. So Jim is my hero. I'll get into the presentation, and that is me on the left. Can you believe that? Obviously, I'm on the right. I was 8 years old and Paul was 34. Paul got down here in 1962. I moved to Cape Coral with my family in 1960. So I was here a couple of years. Jack and Leonard Rosen were in the hair preparation business in Baltimore, Maryland. During that period of time, there was a lot of talk about going down and develop Florida. That would seem to be the big fad. And they thought they'd take a look at it. And they came down here and they hopped in an airplane and they flew all over the state of Florida. And they saw that little section of land right there. That's Jack and Leonard Rosen there. And they decided that they were going to purchase it and get into the land development business. Well, they purchased it by air. In 1958, that's Redfish Point. Does anybody know where that is? Not the old timers. Let's give some of the other people a chance. Give you an idea, that's it right there. That's the yacht club. That point right there is the yacht club. They purchased it. Once they got their feet on the ground, they realized that they purchased a lot of swampland. It wasn't high enough to build on. So they ended up having to do a huge amount of dredging and to build all the canals. They had not planned on a waterfront wonderland to start with, but that's what it ended up being, to be able to get the sea level high enough. The elevation down the yacht club is about 5 foot above sea level. That's the lowest area in Cape Coral. As you go further north, you see fewer canals. So based on that, they didn't have to dig as many canals because the elevation went up. But you can see a lot of this was infilled and dredged. This area right here is where the Cape Coral Bridge, sooner or later, will come across the river. The original part that they bought was 4,500 acres, and that was from Cape Coral Parkway South out to Pelican Boulevard. The 4,500 acres, you've heard over and over and over, Cape Coral was a poorly planned community. Well, the fact of the matter is, the original plan of Cape Coral was very good. And that is, they had yacht club, they had up here at Cape Coral Parkway, they had a business district, they had the Parks and Rec down here, and then also at Four Freedoms, they had multifamily, they had single family, the multifamily buffered between commercial and residential. So all in all, it was really a well-planned community. They even had an industrial park, we'll talk about that too. The problem that they had was a success. They sold the land, and they continued buying more, continued developing. The plan went out the window at that time. To give you an idea, the original purchase of 4,500 acres, today it's Cape Coral is 76,000 acres, to give you an idea how it grew. It's still the same point down here, and that's the point right there, and that's Yacht Club, and you see obviously that was constructed. That picture was taken at the corner of 47th Terrace and Del Prado, and I'll give you an idea where it is. Carriage Cleaners is still there. And that was the entry coming into Cape Coral. When I first got here in 1960, there was a guard shack there, and it was a gated community. And if you had friends coming in after 6 o'clock or whatever time they put on it, you had to call the guard, Earl Fryerfrock, and let him know you got people coming in, or you would not be able to get into Cape Coral. So that was our original security, and the guard shack was right here on this corner. Nautilus Hotel, the Rosen brothers, again, were land developers, and they sold lots. They didn't build businesses, they didn't operate businesses, and you're going to hear about that in a minute. But they had to have a place to house people. The Nautilus Inn was originally built, and a little two-story building back here, and this is on the corner of Cape Coral Parkway and Del Prado. Think about that. Do you see anything in that picture that's missing? By the way, this is Paul's part of the presentation. I don't come in until later. And I did learn that after about 20 years of giving this presentation. I did learn all about Paul and how he did it. I tell you what's missing there? You can't figure it out? Traffic lights. The first traffic light in Cape Coral was not there. It was actually at Coronado and Cape Coral Parkway. It was the first traffic light in Cape Coral. From this intersection right here, Cape Coral Parkway, to Pine Island Road is 7 miles. All of us knew Cape Coral, Del Prado, not as Del Prado, but it was a 7-mile road. And it wasn't until many years later that a lot of the 7-mile road came out of our vocabulary, and we started calling it Del Prado. Now, I guarantee 90% of the people in this room, sometime in the next 7 days, are going to be driving from Cape Coral Parkway to Pine Island Road to check to see if I was right. But I am correct, right, old timers? It was a 7-mile road. Oh, see, I haven't lied yet that you called me in. And that today is what? It's the Holiday Inn Express, is what's in that intersection today. The Nautilus housed all the entertainment. There was nothing in Cape Coral when we got here. There wasn't a movie theater. There wasn't really fine restaurants and bars all over the place, like up and down 47th Terrace now. There wasn't places to go play cards. There was nothing here. So everything we did, including a lot of the church services, were in that building right there. And they had movies for kids, and so all the activity. And Rosen Brothers did a good job trying to entertain us, because again, there was nothing here, and we were 15 miles from anything, and I'll tell you all about that later too. We have the Surfside Restaurant, which was a restaurant that they built that was right behind the Nautilus Inn. And it had a little coffee shop down here on the right-hand side. I didn't want to give that up yet. It had a coffee shop down here on the right-hand side, and that was the fine dining. That's when all the strategic planning from the salesmen from Gulf America would get together and plan on how they're going to be dealing with the people when they came in, as well as that's where we'd go down there and have breakfast and dinner, and that was the only restaurant in town at the time. And that is Perkins Restaurant today, to give you an idea of where that was located. 4-story building. That was the building that Rosen Brothers built to command all of their development activity. That's a duplicate of one that they had over in Miami. And they just brought the plans over here and built it. And they moved their operations center in that building, and that's where they had all their sales activity, and that's where Paul's office was located. But you see, again, there's a traffic light just later. And that's where it is today. Wells Fargo on the corner of 47th and Del Prado and Cape Coral Parkway. That is Don Graff's Coin Laundry, and that was the gift shop, the Glass Boot, am I right? The Glass Boot bar was also in there, and you see this lovely paved road. That's what a lot of the roads looked like when we got here. We got the rental car, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but that was really the first commercial areas that started developing, and you see how they developed it, and that is where that building is today. Doesn't have a name on it. It used to be a news press building a while ago, but that's where that is. Don Graff, that owned that coin op, turned out later to become our mayor. And he was a really creative guy. There's not a business I don't think that Don wouldn't try to get into or did get into. And the rental car business was one of them. And he had, if you wanted to rent a car, that was it. That was the only car. But what he did do, as creative as he was, is on this side right here, he'd put a number 1. And on the other side of the car, he put number 2. And so everybody thought Don had more cars than he did and thought business was going well. While we're looking at that car, we're looking north, 47th Terrace and north. And that's what Cape Coral looked like behind Big John Shopping Center. There was just nothing there. The Rosen Brothers got accused of bulldozing all the big redwood trees and all the big forest trees that we had in Cape Coral. Well, folks, we didn't have any of those to start with, and that's a pretty good picture. But we didn't have those trees. If you remember the picture of the yacht club for the aerial, it was all salt turns, muck pockets, as Paul used to call them, and a lot of mangroves. Did they tear down a couple of mangrove trees? Yeah, they did. But that's the kind of area this was. The further north you went, it got into pasture land. And there was a lot of raising of cattle north of probably Veterans Parkway up in that area. There were a lot of cattle farms that were up there. So we really never had the big redwoods. In the 40s, possibly the early 50s, they came in and did some clear-cut harvesting of all the big trees here all the way down through Collier County. So any of the big trees that we had that had been here forever were taken down then, and it wasn't the Rosen brothers that did it. We had nothing to do. Did I say that yet? Have you figured that one out yet? We had nothing to do in Cape Coral. And so the Rosen brothers gave us a courtesy bus and a driver. And you'll meet the driver in just a minute, but that was the first courtesy bus we had. And the purpose of that bus is 2 or 3-fold. They would pile all the women on it, and they would take them to Fort Myers shopping. Okay, let's think about this a minute. 7 Mile Road, Del Prado. We'd get to Pine Island Road. We'd turn right, and at the time, the intersection for Pondella was right there. We'd go Pondella. We'd go to Old 41. Then we'd go across the Old Ensign Bridge, and then we'd go in downtown Fort Myers, where there was only about 4 stores and 3 movie theaters, and the Arcade Cigar Store, and that was the sum total of where we had to go or could go if we left Cape Coral. That drive, by the way, only took about an hour because Del Prado was really teeny, and the snakes were about this big that would crawl across, and driving a Volkswagen, you'd have to slow down and let the snake get off the road to be able to pass. Well, as the Rosen brothers continued to sell and things got better, we got a Mercedes bus, and that's Nick Frampton. He was the bus driver. And if he wasn't taking the kids on Saturday to go to the movies in Fort Myers, he was taking the women shopping, and the old story is he spent more time with the wives than the husbands did. Because again, there was nothing in Cape Coral, and I know I said that once. If you think you see, give me technology. Brian, you knew I couldn't do this. If you think you see right here an aircraft control tower, that's exactly what you're looking at. That is located on 47th Terrace behind what is now the Cape Coral Town Center. And the Rosen brothers were marketing geniuses. They had 5 172 aircrafts that they would fly people around. They'd bring people in from Pennsylvania or Ohio or Michigan or wherever, land at Page Field. They'd bus them over here. They'd house them in the Nautilus, and they'd put them in these airplanes, and they'd give them 5-minute tours. And you can see in this picture how the development stopped out here at Pelican, by the way. That's a good example of that. And that is the Nautilus right there, which is now the Holiday Inn. And this is Cape Coral Parkway, and there was no need to have a 4-lane road here because we had no bridge. But they had 5 172 Cessnas, and they took everybody up to be able to see where their land was. There is a myth that got started by a well-known marketing guy that they used to have little 5-pound or 2-pound bags of flour, and they used to throw the flour out to mark their lot. Well, that was a myth that was created by a marketing genius, and that was really not the truth. They also, and we're going to get back to, we got them up in the airplane. Now the commercial. This is where Paul steps off about now, and this is where Elmer comes in, because Elmer's family had a little something to do with it. We are hillbillies out of West Virginia. We had 2 grocery stores up in Bluefield, and my grandparents had decided to move to Cape Coral. Actually, no. They had a place out on Fort Myers Beach that they would come to 55 through 58, and they heard about the Rosen brothers buying Cape Coral and wanted to do development. So my grandfather came over here and met with Jack and Leonard Rosen and got to know them and thought, that sounds like a great idea. Well, Jack and Leonard were marketing geniuses and land developers. They didn't want to own a grocery store. They didn't want to be a doctor. They didn't want to be a postmaster. So they, in their own ways, con people any way they can to bring the basic businesses to Cape Coral to be able to open. My grandfather called my dad in West Virginia one day and said, hey, we've decided to build a house in Cape Coral, build the shopping center, I'll tell you about that. And also, we would need a grocery store. So why don't you pack up the kids and move down here? Well, my dad said, how many people live in that town right now? Well, my grandfather said, right now there's 13. I won't tell you what my dad said to my grandfather, but I will tell you, my mother won. And we packed up and we moved down and we opened a grocery store. My dad's name was also Elmer. That's why you see Elmer on the sign up there. The shopping center was built by a group of people that was put together, and they named it Citizens Mutual of Cape Coral. We have it to assemble land today because we don't have enough commercial property. To give you an idea, I think Joe last corrected me, we have 8% non-residential commercial property today. A well-planned community has 30%. So we're in a world of hurt, and that's why you see a lot of rezoning attempting to go on right now in Cape Coral to try and get a commercial districts all over the Cape. So it's a struggle. I'll ask you about what is Cape Coral's biggest problem then and today towards the end of this thing. So they built the shopping center, and it's 52,700 square feet. The first grocery store was in there. The first doctor was located in there. The first library. The women's club took this unit space right here, and they created the first library for Cape Coral, which was so small that only one person could really go in at a time. And of course, you didn't need a lot of books for 13 families. So if we go here, that's where the Cape Coral Library was, and that was also the medical center prior to being the library. The first medical center, the first doctor was Dr. David. Dr. David lived in Fort Myers. Now, we've already established that it's an hour drive to get to Cape Coral. So him being smart, he came by boat. If the fishing was good, he was late for your appointment. Or if the weather was bad, he just didn't come. I was, and still am today, extremely accident prone, and it was a terrible thing to get hurt and have to go to Fort Myers. And when I get to the hospitals, we'll talk about that in a minute too. But Dr. Tate, Hinkle, and Dawson later became the doctors after Dr. David left. Now, think about this a minute. If you got 13 to 28 families when I moved down here, why would a doctor come and open a practice? If you got a grocery store for 28 families, who in the hell would be dumb enough to open a grocery store for that? Well, the Rosens figured that one out too. They paid the doctor's salary up to a certain level of people that got to Cape Coral. And in the case of the grocery store, they paid my dad $2.50 a family for the families that were not here, up to 300 families. So once, and I was able to find the files when Paul and I went down to clear out the attic of the yacht club, and I didn't even know they existed. I knew the doctor got paid, but I didn't know my dad got paid. And I found files, and in those files is weekly reports of every family that moved to Cape Coral. So that meant $2.50 came off of the check they paid my dad. And so we had that all the way through. So I could tell you who the first 300 families were at the Cape and when they moved here, by those lists of my dad not getting paid by the Rosen brothers. So that's how we got our first everything that came, is the Rosen brothers supplemented their income to make it worthwhile to be able to do. The shopping center, by the way, sold in 1978 to a company in Miami. In '84, it sold again to a company in St. Louis, and it was going bankrupt in 1990. And I ended up buying it with my sister back in 1990. So we own Big John's today. And speaking of that, well, I'll come back to that. That's the library, I don't need to tell you that. That's the first church, official church, that was in Cape Coral that was not at the Nautilus for a church service. And that was Reverend Everett Bunk, Christ Lutheran Church, and he became known as a storefront pastor because he was in the shopping center or retail establishment. So that was the first actually brick and mortar church that they moved in. The first church we went to was it was in somebody's house. And we would get dressed in our bathing suits, and we would go at 7:30 in the morning, and we would go have a 30-minute church service with our bathing suits, and we would take off then, and not just my family, but everybody that went to that church, and we would take our truck to Fort Myers Beach. Again, 7 Mile Road, Pondella, McGregor Boulevard. You realize how far Fort Myers Beach is away? Well, it's about the same distance as it is today in January, February, and March because of the snowbirds. It still takes the same time, so nothing has changed. But so that's the first church we went to, and we all did make a habit of, since there was nothing here, most of Cape Coral took off and went to Fort Myers Beach to enjoy themselves. Got an idea what that is? Putt-putt. Yeah, also note that was the first business that also went out of business in Cape Coral. And the reason it did is everybody works during the day. And then they get off at night. So we have to have some lights up here so they'd be able to play putt-putt. Remember that aircraft tower I showed you earlier for the 5172s? I'm sure they used it for the mosquitoes because those suckers were big and plentiful. We had two things I'll remember in my childhood is the mosquitoes were so thick you couldn't even think about going out at night. We kids, and that's why some of us are really weird, used to run behind the trucks where they were dumping out the chemicals for the smoke. And you know if you stay in that smoke long enough, that stuff drips all over you. And so that's why a lot of us, I know about 4 or 5 in this room are kind of nuts over. But the mosquitoes put that guy out of business. This is where Paul's still sitting over here. I give Paul credit because that's about the time the mosquito control district really began to get started. And Paul sat on the mosquito control board for 22 years. So he served his time to help make Cape Coral the place it is today so you could walk outside. The other thing I hated about Cape Coral was salt water, or sulfur water. You remember the great smells of the sulfur water? That is the Cork Arcade, another building that was built, and I want you to look right here where it says Defala Construction. And Defala Construction I mentioned earlier, Butch Defala moved in with Kenny Schwartz, the first resident, and Dennis Defala, his son back here, was here, and he's going to be the world-renowned speaker here in March or April or whatever your date is, Dennis. Well, Dennis's dad built pretty well the majority of what got constructed in the first 3 or 4 or 5 years of the Cape. Mostly the commercial. He built the shopping center. He did build our house. We lived down in Flamingo, and I'll point that out. And 2 days before Hurricane Donna, we were supposed to move in the house. My dad said, furniture stays in storage in Fort Myers. The men stayed here to protect whatever. The women and the kids took off and went to Lake Wales. Donna I here, Cape Coral. The I went over Cape Coral, and then it proceeded to go up the coastline and cut into Lake Wales, and the I hit us, so we got it too. We had heard that there wasn't a tree left standing in Cape Coral from Lake Wales. So we figured all of our dads and husbands were dead. Well, we got down here, once again, fake news. Nothing's changed now that I think about it. Nothing has changed. But what we did find out is Dennis's dad did such a great job on our house. When we got down to Flamingo Drive, the only thing left was the concrete slab. It looked like he had poured the slab, and that was the extent of it. So we stayed and lived in the Coronado apartments at Coronado and Cape Coral Parkway for another 6 months while Dennis's dad rebuilt the house. But that was the only thing that got blown down. This didn't, nor the shopping center. And where Walgreens used to be, and now it's a dollar store, and I've got to upgrade the pictures, that's where Walgreens is today, but that's where the Quirk Arcade was. And that was another commercial little area. Building had more primarily offices in it than it did retail. Sam Nahama built the Togs and Boggs, which was a Boss manufacturer, and that's the first manufacturer that we had in Cape Coral. That's our first industrial park. And there it is right here. That's the beginning of it. City Hall is further out here. And that's a good idea. This area here is the industrial park you know today, and then of course City Hall's out here. The yacht club. We had to entertain these people that we flew in, and we had to make them feel really good and feel like they really wanted to live to Cape Coral. That's the day before the yacht club opened. That's the yacht club opening. That's why Paul was brought to town. He was worked for the Chamber of Commerce in Kissimmee, and Ann's dad hired Paul and brought him down to Cape Coral and gave him his first job. And the first job he had to do was open the yacht club in 1962 when he came down. And then Paul took care of pretty well all of the marketing and entertaining. The fun part of Cape Coral was Paul's primary job. The beach was there. We had the beach there at the time. The pavilion wasn't there. And then we have Alan Pearson's, I just went brain dead. Try it, thank you. The Rosens showed Cape Coral lots by air, and they also piled them on the boat, and they showed them by water too. So they were out whining and dining these poor suckers that they wanted to sell Cape Coral to, and we just happened to be a few of them. But that was Wally's job in taking the trident out and showing people how wonderful the waterfront wonderland of Cape Coral was. Waterfront wonderland. Let me stop there. My grandfather helped build the shopping center, and he got bored and decided that he wanted to give people a second opportunity to buy or sell real estate, as opposed to just Gulf American and the Rosen Brothers. So he started the first real estate office in Cape Coral called Wonderland Realty, that I happen to own today. And the Rosen Brothers were pushing Cape Coral at the time as the waterfront wonderland. You need to think where maybe that name came from. My grandfather took advantage of it. We got our mail by boat. Have you heard that rumor? It's fact, folks. It is fact. This is Antiva. It came in down at the yacht club. It would leave Fort Myers. It would come up the river. It would make a stop in Cape Coral. It would go out to Ponderosa. It would go out to Sanibel, and then it would proceed coming back here. Pine Island too, I think. And you see the top of it right here is all seating area. Of course, it had it down here too. So not only was it the mail boat, but it was a tour boat, and you could get on and get off whenever you wanted to. That house right there was ours, and that was 1962, so that was after Donna had come through. Earl Freinerfrock was our first law enforcement police. He was deputized by Snag Thompson, Snag at the time, I believe, Lee County Sheriff. But that was the first actual cop car, and there's a picture of our little gated community guardhouse that we had. And so that also was our ambulance. Remember I told you it was accident prone? You know how long it took that thing to get to Lee Memorial Hospital? Well, the ambulance service was operated by Harvey Engelhardt Funeral Home. So the hearse and the ambulances were one and the same. So what would happen if somebody were to get hurt or sick or whatever, then Earl would pick them up in the cop/ambulance car and start 7 Mile Road. Remember, we got a long distance to go, and Harvey Engelhardt would come to meet us halfway. They'd transfer the patient, they'd put him in the back of their car and go to the hospital. And as Paul used to say, because it's Harvey Engelhardt, after they got him, they drove real slow. That is the first city hall, And to give you an idea of where that was, by the way, everybody knows the city became a city in 1970. That has since been torn down. It is now a bank out in front of Walmart. That needs updated too. That's our first police chief, Jim White, Andy Costa, Bernie Schwartz, thank you. So we had, Jim was the chief, we had lieutenant, we had a sergeant, 2 deputies, and secretary was the first police station that we had. That's a police station that was up on Cultural, or not Cultural, but yeah, by City Hall. That was given to Paul because that's the last time that they ever didn't take home cars. So that, Paul liked that picture because that's, everybody had to take their cop car to the station that night. And that is City Hall, and that's a public safety building. That is where the police are housed now. There's a part of me in that we needed a police headquarters really bad. And the police chief and fire chief got together along with our city council and decided that we need to float a $110 million bond issue to build this emergency operations center and police department. Well, this voter said, there's no way in hell that we're going to spend $110 million for this kind of facility. And so really told them we're not going to do it. So each council member had the opportunity to select one citizen of Cape Coral that had some kind of clue or idea on what and how we could get that bond issue amounted down and how we could build that. And while I was spending a little bit of time in my Keys house, Chris Berardi, sitting at the council at the time, seated me as his one selection on the Public Safety Building Committee. And I just happened to be gone the following week, which was the first meeting, and got a call from Chris and said, oh, by the way, since you missed the first meeting, you're chairman. So I got the chair of the Public Safety Building Committee for 9 months. We really went through a lot, but the facility that you see there actually was built for $28 million, and it is state of the art. It's something we really got to be proud of. That's a good idea how citizens and a lot of people in this room have their footprints in solid concrete that will never go away, giving back to the community. The hospital. Lee Memorial. Does that look like the hospital we got today? Over on Cleveland Avenue? Well, it is. And which, by the way, didn't have air conditioning. And that was taken, all these pictures primarily were taken in 1962, and you can tell by the vintage of the cars. Well, there were several people that had gotten together, and Paul was one of them. I believe Ann Bob, your dad was one of them that was involved, and decided that we need our own hospital here in Cape Coral because of that long drive to get over the lake. And so they were able to get a bond issue and build our first Cape Coral hospital, which is the one we have today on Del Prado. And that's as the campus has grown. Now, this is a full private organization, not government. Hope there's nobody in government here because I'm saying bad things about you. Private organization. These guys had such foresight on how the growth is going to be in Cape Coral that building right there can take 6 more stories on the existing foundation. That is planning for the future. And that is one thing in one of Cape Coral's problems today. And I said I was going to mention it. Anybody, well, too many of you see me talk, so you're going to blow it. Marty Stawicki came to me and wanted my support of vote. And I asked her, I said, Marty, what's the biggest problem Cape Coral faces today? Right now today, what's the biggest problem? And she thought, well, it had to be the UEP, Utilities Expansion Program. And I said, nope, it's the same problem that we had in 1960 when we were first built. And that's our success. Our growth and success has caused the problems since 1960 to what we have today. I admit talking about 8% non-residential for commercial, were having to try to play catch up. Our utilities weren't playing in the ground, so we got the UEP today, we're trying to play catch up. So Cape Coral, the Rosen brothers planned a 4,500 acre, beautiful community. And Cape Coral, because of its success, has grown to be 76,000 acres. So, the Rose Gardens. Told you the Rosen brothers are marketing geniuses. They purchased or they had the land, and they were going to build a facility, and they also had a couple of model homes out there, and they called it the Rose Garden, and they got together with Jackson Perkins Rose Company, and they came up with their own brand of Cape Coral rose that would grow in our Florida climate, because the Rosen brothers were told that you couldn't grow roses here. Well, they had 30,000 roses that they planted out at Rose Garden Boulevard and all around it. That's down at Tarpon Point. That right there is the Waltzing Waters. Back here under the cover you'll see was the dolphin pool, and we're going to get to that. But that had anything, well, just continue going on through. That's later years as Tarpon Point got built. But let's go back here. The Hall of Patriots was built. I'm going to show you that in a minute. There's the Rose Gardens. There's the amphitheater. That's the Garden of Patriots after it was completed. And Abe Lincoln is sitting back here on a log. And you're going to see Abe in a minute. Here's old Abe. But they did things right. This is a porpoise pool. And the Rosen brothers hired the set designers from the Radio City Music Hall to come down here and design the porpoise pool set. So they didn't cut corners when they designed or did things in Cape Coral. It was really phenomenal. And Mr. Scarpuzzi, and I'm forgetting his first name, was the first porpoise trader. And it's all part of the backdrop from Radio City Music Hall construction. The reflection pool was absolutely beautiful. We had Japanese gardens involved. National Hibiscus Society had come in and set up a garden with a little zoo that was down there, and that's just more of them. Waltzing Waters, that's what it looked like at night. Choreographed music and lights, and it later got moved up to the German American Hall where it is up there, and you could tell because there's the pine trees in the background up there. In later years it got moved to South Fort Myers, and then the shell factory, and there's a lot of work being put underground to get Waltzing Waters back to Cape Coral, and I think we're going to see it. Paul just saw that beautiful sunrise and liked the fact that we finally had a bridge that was open in 1964, by the way. He took that picture, and he said the only reason he wanted this in here is that was the last time you would ever see the Clusatchie River blue. Well, Paul wasn't here last year for the blue-green algae, so maybe it looked the same then. That's the original 4,500 acres pretty well of Cape Coral, and the Cape Coral Bridge when it originally went in, and that was so sweet because instead of an hour to get to downtown Fort Myers, it was a lot faster. And now to go to Fort Myers Beach, it was only 10 minutes because we didn't have snowbirds in. And that's the continued growth of Cape Coral. That's the beginning of the bridge. The Veterans Bridge got built. I'm going to give Joe a lot of credit. If you don't know what the politics were involved, the snooty people of the old guard Fort Myers did not want Cape Coral to end up on the Greater Boulevard. And they blocked us 6 ways from Sunday in building that bridge for 20 years. And it was Mayor Mazurkowitz, that happens to be sitting back there in the back, that was able to finally get that thing negotiated so we could go ahead and build the Veterans Memorial Bridge. And you know how much we need it today, especially when there's an accident on the Cape Coral Bridge, how busy that one gets. Well, along with that, they had the foresight, and this actually was government, so I shouldn't have talked bad about government, of building the Veterans Memorial going through all the way through Cape Coral because we really don't have good east-west quadrants. At this point, I tell people, Right after that was first opened, I was going to a meeting at Gulf Coast Village, and I'm out there, and I'm pretty well the only car on that road. The sun is coming up behind me, and I'm thinking, holy shit, Cape Coral's got an expressway. This is the kid that came down here when there was no pavement on the roads in Cape Coral, and we've got an expressway. So you saw how Cape Coral was growing over the years. And that's just another picture of it. That's a good picture of pre-70. Actually, it was 1968 that thing got built. That was called the Nobility Area. There are 368 houses that was put out there by Gulf American because they were trying to get growth to come up. This is Del Prado right here. They were trying to get growth to come up here. That already, they put water and sewer in when they built that area. And it was named the Nobility Area, and the reason they did is model homes, they had the Count, the Countess, the Baron, the Baroness. One of them was a 2-bedroom, one was a 3-bedroom house. So you also see little pockets here, like that is a good example. As the Rosen brothers were acquiring, remember I told you to buy this land and this land and this land, well, there were some people who held out and wouldn't sell that. And so this is a good example of somebody that held out. And I can tell you real stories about Barry that owned this corner here, but I'm running out of time, so I won't. This is Pondella, which no longer does that, and you'll be able to see it in a minute. That is that intersection, I say today, maybe 10 years ago, and we have Pondella now cuts out behind Target and goes to Fort Myers as opposed to coming up to this intersection. And then Pond Island Road goes out right here. And of course that's Lowe's and your Super Target and all that. So that was what that intersection looked like back then. Right now we're bouncing on 200,000 people population. We're a build out of in excess of 400,000 people. The slideshow at the beginning says yesterday and tomorrow. That's what that intersection is going to look like tomorrow. What did I tell you about our only problem has been our success? Here's a perfect example of it. God, it was not that bad. And when I got interviewed for the Luminary Award that I recently had, I don't know whether you had seen it, but they had asked me how I enjoyed it. Cape Coral has been extremely good to me. And I've dedicated my life to give back. And my comment when they were talking about, okay, I've seen the first 200,000 people, I also told them that I really enjoyed that. It did a lot for me, but I'm not sure I want to see the next 200. So it, you know, Cape Coral, like I said, has done very good. I've been a very good part of it because Cape Coral has given me so much. And obviously I love this place. That's why I'm called Cape Coral's cheerleader, I guess. 1958, Rosen Brothers had a dream. And there's the dream. So we made it. We got a long way to go. And as I talk to the youth groups, I tell them, or leadership Cape Coral primarily, tell them, if you think about it, when we got here, us old farts, Cape Coral was a blank slate. You could be anything and do anything that you wanted to. And fast forward 58 years now, we still got half of that slate's blank. So you could be anything and do anything, and you too could have your footprints embedded in Cape Coral and make Cape Coral a better place than it already is today. Thanks to Joe, I'm a community trustee, and we made a pledge that we're going to leave Cape Coral a better place than when we found it. And I almost found it like that, so I guess I'm done. Thank you very much. Thank you, Museum. I hope you enjoyed my family story. But when these folks showed up, you just kind of screwed me over. But thank you guys. Did I lie too much?
Do you have any questions? for Elmer?
Yeah, questions?
Anybody with questions?
What else was Reverend Bunk known for other than being the storefront pastor?
His daughters.
That's right. What
And-
daughters he had?
And you better duck, because right behind you is another one, Bob Finkernagel. What was he known for? His daughters. And Paul Sanborn, what was he known for? His daughters. And the guys like us running around. No, with nothing to do, by the way. Missy, thank you.